What's going on, everybody? Thank you guys for being here. First and foremost, appreciate you guys coming to watch this. I feel like you guys are going to learn a lot just from this conversation, because even reading through the book, I feel like I went in with a lot of information and I came away with even more. So, again, I'm Ethan Sands. This is Earl Hopkins. This is Dr. Jeremy McCool. Obviously, really cool name. But let's just get right into it. So, guys, when thinking about constructing this book, every generation of hip-hop seems to have artists who define an era, right? But not every era inspires an entire book like you guys have, right? So what convinced the two of you that this was the right story to tell, and why did it need to be told now?
I'll start off. I would say both of us already had done a lot of work in hip hop. Me in higher ed, I teach courses on socially conscious hip hop, on music and social justice. I've conducted research on specifically socially conscious hip hop and how it's perceived. Earl Hopkins, of course, my man's over here, has also been writing pieces on hip hop and interviewing hip hop artists for years. So we both are extremely passionate about hip hop already. In this specific book, we felt like that there was a huge need for a book that really both encapsulated conscious rap and the impact of hip hop throughout time, but also was framed around Kendrick Lamar and J. Cole and their contributions in modern day. So yeah, we knew early that it was a very, very important text. And it's the first academic book about J. Cole. There had been nothing else academically published on J. Cole and his contributions either, or whatever.
Yeah, when we agreed to do this book, I mean, this was July 2023, and so we were, a couple months removed from hip hop celebrating its 50th anniversary, and so we felt like at that time, I mean, we ultimately agreed, like hip hop wasn't exactly in the place that we imagined it, right? I think not alone can Billboard success determine like the influence and impact of hip hop, obviously, but at that point, that had been the longest drought that a hip hop album hadn't reached the #1 spot atop the Billboard in 30 years, right? And so we felt like with such a big ceremonious moment, 50 years of hip hop, just months away from being celebrated, and yet we don't have a defining album or project for that time or that year. Like, we just felt like there was something that needed to be done. And so in our conversations, we came to the realization we both have admiration for Kendrick and Cole, so much so that we feel like they're like the last two stewards of this tradition that we love, that's really built hip hop, which is socially conscious music that actually has meaning, right? Like music that chronicles like poverty, mass incarceration, and just the ills of society. And so we felt like, man, there needs to be a book on this, and we were the people to do it.
I think you mentioned something extremely important there, because there are multiple other artists that have had #1 hits, that have been on the top of the Billboard, but you guys chose J. Cole and Kendrick Lamar. And two of the biggest portions of this is obviously the book being titled about resistance. Why did you guys feel like those two were the stewards or the most important factors of going into resistance and the tradition that has been set in the music industry and that?
Yeah, I would say it's not, there's been plenty of hip hop artists who've spoken about social issues. There are plenty still today, but they've been able to do it at a high level and reach the masses while doing it. So they've been able to have hit records, they've been able to sell out arenas, but still keeping conscious and socially progressive messaging at the forefront. So that's really the reason why we knew that they were really the ones who we should frame it around, is because of the fact that they've been able to reach mainstream success, but also have addressed issues from white supremacy, drug addiction, poverty, and all of these different societal issues that impact the Black community within their music and all of their albums. So that was one of the reasons why we really knew that we had to use them as a framework for modern day.
Absolutely, and to piggyback on that, like even on a basic level, like they resist like some of the musical trends that have ascended, like during their own ascension, right? Like so Cole, you know, as opposed to like maybe other mainstream or popular artists, he didn't make the same music. He decided, yo, I'm gonna drop an album, no features, just me, and it went what, triple platinum? 2014 Forest Hills Drive. So throughout their career, we can speak to many examples, but throughout their career, they made conscious decisions to oppose what other artists are doing whether it's messaging, whether it's the way that they presented themselves as artists, as men, like they went a different direction and knowing that they were going to be fully themselves and whoever embraced them would embrace them fully. And it's just no coincidence that they're two of our favorite current hip hop artists, but two of the biggest hip hop artists there are because of that reason. So it was a perfect marriage of the two.
I mean, when you said a very key word there, conscious, right? Because we talk about how this is about Kendrick Lamar and J. Cole, but what the book is really about is conscious rap and being able to portray yourself or portray what you're thinking in society and how hip hop is kind of reflected what society is going through in its entirety, right? So when you think about J. Cole, when you think about Kendrick Lamar, when you think about conscious rap, how do they portray themselves in a different light that allows you to dive into that into an entirety?
That's a great question. I think the biggest thing is that their messaging is intentional. And even with cohesive projects that address social issues specifically, like when you're looking at an album like J. Cole's album KOD, in the height of the opioid epidemic, he decided to make an anti-drug album and an album centered around addiction and how it impacts society. So taking those type of risks, despite it not being the popular messaging at the time, but still being willing to address those issues within their music.
That's a great example. And another one, I think, on the Kendrick side, I'll be candid with y'all. Y'all are family. I'm more partial to Kendrick. Me and McCool would talk about that a lot. I love Cole, but like I look at Kendrick in other ways. But I'll say like Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers is another example, right? Like that's an album when you really delve into it. I mean, when I first heard it, you could tell like he's unveiling layers of himself, of his family, of his lineage, essentially, in ways that maybe other artists of that ilk aren't doing, right? Like, it was like a audio therapy session that he was giving us insight into. And so in looking back at the album, I appreciate it more. But as a broader conversation, like a lot of artists aren't willing to make those musical choices or risks. And again, key word here is they do it consciously. Like, if they wanted to just make club anthems or bangers, they could. Like they could. They may even arguably be bigger artists, but they chose this route, and in doing so, it just made fans like us, hip hop fans like us, and like y'all, appreciate them that much more.
I'm partial to Cole. I just want that to be on the record. But
yeah, but I love both of them.
With that being said, we talk about conscious rap, right? And we obviously understand that in hip hop nowadays, you mentioned mainstream. Mainstream is becoming the way to make your money, the way to make sure that you're still in the limelight. What does that say about the culture? Is the culture changing? Is the grouping of people listening to music changing? What does that say about us that conscious rap is becoming into the background rather than being as important as mainstream is now?
I would say it's a layered situation. So I think attention spans have changed when it comes to music. I think streaming has a large role in changing the attention spans of listeners. So I definitely think that plays a role. But I also think record labels have a large brunt of the blame for that as well, in choosing which artists and which messaging to push as singles. And we have a chapter, our final chapter, we really hold record labels accountable for their role and what messaging is getting pushed. A lot of times it's easier to blame the artists for making certain types of music, but 9 times out of 10, those artists don't decide what single goes out from that album. That is a record label executive who's making that call. And so I definitely think record labels have a large brunt of that blame too, because there are artists today who are making amazing music and meaningful music. It's just not often being pushed to the forefront in the same way that it has been in past generations.
Absolutely, and to Jeremy's point, like with attention spans changing, that's one of many examples of how consumers have shifted, right? A lot of y'all are listening, and me included, listening to like social media driven songs, listening to playlist builders, but not listening to songs that again have those conscious elements into them. Not always, right? I listen to like some of the artists that y'all will listen to, I'm sure, tonight at the TNT party. But also, I feel like it's important to have that.
Don't judge me either.
See y'all there.
But it's important to have that balance. You know what I mean? And I think. And McCool actually is more, and you can speak to this later, he's a bit more optimistic, I would say, about where hip hop is than I am. But I think slowly but surely there is a changing of the tides. I think like audiences are still or are wanting or desiring more conscious-driven music more than they had been maybe 10 years ago. So I do see the tide shifting a little bit, although I'm not as optimistic. It'll look like maybe decades past, but we'll see. Time will tell.
I think it's important to also understand the underlying features that were happening throughout the book, and you as an educator being important in this, because Kendrick Lamar also kind of got his start from poetry, from one of a teacher teaching him how to write in stanzas, how to create lyrics and rhymes and rhythm and all these things. When we talk about a time where the literacy rate is declining rapidly, where even adults can't read or write at a 6th grade level, how important and what kind of stories are we going to be losing because of the lack thereof of teaching, and then the literacy rate as well? How important is that?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that point. Literacy rates, as some of you all may know, are declining rapidly. The last time I looked, it was at 54% of U.S. adults can't read at a 6th grade level. And this is across race, across class, this is across the board. So I definitely think that impacts what type of artists are producing music, but also what consumers are willing to really decode when they're listening to music, and what type of depth that they're willing to accept in music. So I definitely think it plays a large role in it. I'm seeing it in real time, even with students. When I showed them some of the music by like Nas and introduced them to different artists, and I remember playing Illmatic to them, and they couldn't believe that he was a teenager when he wrote this music, and the vocabulary that he was using, and somebody who dropped out in middle school. But when you listen to some artists today who are being pushed to the masses, you can tell that it's different, very different, very, 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 very different. So I think that the literacy rate, I think it both impacts the creators of the music, but also the consumers of the music, and how they're able to decipher that message.
Just to piggyback off of that, because I think that's an important point. When you talk about just the educators of the world and how important they are in the next generation of, not necessarily rap artists or whatever, but just the next generation of writers, creators, journalists, right? How important is it to have the educators that are willing to take the extra leap, the extra bound, to make sure that they're heard, but also to help whoever they can to create?
Extremely. I'll say I teach at a predominantly white institution, but we have about, last time I checked, like maybe 18% black students. And even the impact that I've been able to have on those students' lives have been drastic, being able to motivate them and impact them in that way. So I think it's very important. And even we interviewed a lot of people for this book, one of them being Kendrick Lamar's elementary poetry teacher, who impacted him and influenced him to want to write more. So I think that role that educators play in shaping and encouraging the next generation is very important.
And can I add this too? And then in thinking about Cole's experience in college, right, in higher ed education, and how that influenced him, and he's alluded to it, referenced it throughout his discography, like that also was a point that we really wanted to emphasize in the book. So we have an entire chapter centered on that. And so yeah, those were all organic elements.
I think the next portion, because there's obviously an elephant in the room when it comes to the book being around J. Cole and Kendrick Lamar, feels like there's somebody missing, right? Because of how much people in mainstream talk about Drake. Was that, like, obviously
Intentional? Yeah.
intentional, right? So to ask this briefly, why is Drake left out of this conversation?
So we consciously chose to leave him out.
Speaking of consciousness,
I'm gonna be saying all day.
but I want to add though, we signed this book deal long before the Kendrick and Drake thing popped off. Actually, the week we announced that the book was coming out and that we were writing it, that all started. So there is a chapter that you all will see in the book that is titled Drake, because we were like, we're not sprinkling this throughout the book. Like, there's one chapter that's going to be dedicated to Drake and his contributions and lack thereof. Earl, do you want to go a little more into that?
Yeah, no. So like in in doing that, for us, like it was important to draw that line. It was important to draw the line of what Kendrick represents, what Cole represents, because they're two supernovas in this thing, right? And they're very unique. And Drake is one of the biggest artists, not only in hip hop, but but in music. And we had to acknowledge that. We would be dishonest in not acknowledging that. But the line that we drew was that there's a certain artist who is popular, who makes pop, who literally called himself a pop star, and who makes infectious music that, like, you know, hits radio and clubs and things of that nature, but it lacks the kind of substance that Cole and Kendrick have in their music. And they're also able to make those same mainstream hits. And so we try to set the guys, like try to present that in a way. And I think we were fair in doing that. Some of you all may read the book and feel like maybe we skid to left or right. I don't know, but I think we did a solid, fair job in doing that.
I think you did as well. I know we got to get to Q&A, but I do want to finish with this question for both of you guys because of the impact that it can have on not only your careers, but whoever reads it as well. If someone reads this book 25 years from now, what do you hope they'll understand about this moment in hip hop that maybe people living through it don't fully appreciate just yet?
I really want people to leave with it with a deeper appreciation for the contributions of hip hop artists on society. That's my goal, and specifically the Black community. I think a lot of times we talk about and highlight the negative elements of hip hop, and that is prevalent. But I think that I want to highlight how they've been outspoken on these social issues throughout time. And we even in the first couple of chapters touch on some of the artists that predated hip hop, from Gil Scott-Heron and the Last Poets and artists of that ilk, that really impacted what will become socially conscious hip hop music. So I'm hoping that 25 years somebody will look back at this and see the impact that artists throughout history have had on the Black community and on enlightening and awakening youth.
Absolutely, like I agree 100%. I don't have much to add other than I want also people to read it in 25 years from now and appreciate the musical contributions, not only of Kendrick and Cole, but some of the other artists we mentioned in the book. We didn't go into this project saying there's nothing good or beneficial happening in hip hop now. Like, again, that would be dishonest. It's just that Kendrick and Cole, we feel like, are the leaders of that campaign, right? But I think when people look back on it, they'll go back to those artists, go back to those songs, albums, and everything that defined this era, and hopefully find a deeper appreciation for what existed and saw what issues may have, been present in this time and how they could, reverse those in the future.
Cooked.
All right, at this point, because I know we don't have a whole lot of time because the other session went over, but let's take a couple of questions here. Let's start here.
Could you stand up, say your name and question?
How y'all doing, man?
Microphone check.
We right.
Yeah, you just speak up, brother.
Hi, my name is Quentin.
Thank you.
All right. I got a question. So, you guys mentioned that you made this book before the said beef and how everything pretty much changed after the book was produced. Did any of your views kind of change depending on how, let's say, some of the artists moved? Like J. Cole, kind of insinuating the beef with the said 7-minute drill diss track and kind of backtracking. Kendrick, Drake and Kendrick going at it and how Kendrick basically did what he did with the Super Bowl and everything. Did any of your views change in terms? They're both great, but like any of the views kind of change and make y'all backtrack?
Great question.
I wouldn't say the views changed. We were writing it in real time while it was going on, though. So I think that watching how it played out, I don't think our views on their music and its impact changed at all, or even more of the biographical portions of the book. None of that really shifted. I just think it just made us add some context to things throughout the book. So yeah, I don't think it really changed. I can at least speak on me. It didn't change my perspective early.
No, it didn't really change. If anything, it reaffirmed my views on how I felt. Again, Kendrick and Cole, what they represented, as opposed to the next biggest artist within hip hop. We can talk offline about how I felt about in that moment about Cole's decision, but ultimately, I think in looking back, hindsight is 20/20, but I think he made the right decision. And also I don't think that alone defines his musical contributions. So yeah.
Amazing.
Good afternoon. My name is Jason Smith. I'm from East PA. Earl, first of all, very proud of you, man. Dr. Journey, very proud of you as well.
Thank you. Seriously.
I want to really use the word hard read to describe a book that may be tough for an audience or a member to just digest and maybe take a higher aptitude or effort. Would you maybe describe Cole and Kendrick as hard listens? And maybe would you use, or what would you recommend somebody that says, hey, you're cutting on J. Cole and Kendrick for the very first time, you should probably consider this or do this?
This
Great
dude is
question.
a journalist for real.
100% joking.
I would say, so hard, listen, that's tough. I would say, I don't know how to answer that one, bro.
I got you. I would say for a lot of people, Kendrick Lamar is considered a hard listen for some people. I think Kendrick Lamar's albums they're so layered, and even the subject matter is very, very layered, and even the way he utilizes his voice in different tonality, I think can be a hard listen for some people. If for somebody who was new listening to Kendrick Lamar and wanted to be introduced, I would recommend probably Damn. I think Damn is probably the most like easily consumable, and more on the straightforward side of it, as far as his discography. But J. Cole, I don't really see getting that feedback as far as being a hard listen. Yeah.
I think, just to piggyback on the answer, if you're listening to these people for the first time, sometimes it's best to come in as like trying to learn, right? And maybe have the lyrics with you while you're listening to it, so you can grasp onto what is being said, what the reasoning is behind it. I think a good album for Cole would be Born Sinner, because you have the understanding of what is coming into it, and then also what is being said, what is happening, and all that. Let's go 2 more questions. Let's go here.
Donnie Sanders.
Yes, please.
Hello, everybody. These are Raven, Earl, Jeremy. Y'all know how we rock. But I wanted to ask you guys about gatekeeping in hip hop, honestly. Because I feel like right now the genre is more commercialized more than ever. And with that, there's a whole new audience, right? From my point of view, it looks like a lot of these audiences, they don't want these young black artists to express themselves, at least in a pro-black way. You know what I mean? And I mean, like, you might know, because I listen to a lot of underground music, like, there's a lot of people that they kind of shy away from what Kendrick and Cole would do. And I say that to say, your opinion, like, what does the future of hip hop look like within the younger generation, at least in your eyes? I know you are a little bit different, and you can be different.
Yeah, I'll start, man. I'm from Chicago, so I will highlight, Chicago has a lot of artists with substance, and I think that a lot of them aren't being pushed in the mainstream in that same way. One example is Saba, another one being No Name, another one, even Chance the Rapper's last album, which to me is his most profound work as far as addressing social issues. It was the one that didn't get any of the acclaim. It didn't get Grammy nominated. It wasn't even nominated for a BET Award, nothing. You know what I mean? And I think it was his most profound work. So I think that I definitely think it's intentional. I think that some of those artists aren't being pushed in the same way who have more radical or progressive music. I think that they're intentionally not being pushed in the same way as other artists are today. But I think they're still able to draw their own fan bases. And I think that's why I'm a little more on the optimistic side when it comes to hip hop, is because I don't really judge hip hop based on how many, for lack of better terms, non-black people like it. You know what I mean? I think that it's a black art form, and I think that as long as we're rocking with it, I think I'm fine. Like I don't need the masses to love hip hop for it to be an amazing art form.
And we've seen this shift to more independent artists, and I think by seeing that shift, you'll see more artists taking that stance where it's like, yo, I want to make pro-black music, I want to make radical music, and in building their audience, they're able to give themselves the creative license and like financially support that mission. So I just see hip hop becoming more go rogue, for lack of better words, become more independently driven.
Last one, I see you. Yeah. And also, I know afterwards, if you guys bought the book, there are books over there to purchase. If not, they'll be around to have these conversations as well. Last one for right now.
Greetings, my name is Dory Jones. I am Assistant Program Director at WAM at FAMU. And regarding what Kendrick and Cole represent as conscious rappers, how do them utilizing like trap artists such as Kodak Black and Lil Baby on their albums help shift your perspective in the hope that these types of artists are still talking about meaningful things? Because to an extent, we all know that all rap is conscious. We have G Herbo and PTSD. Lil Baby on My Turn, for example. To an extent, that's conscious out.
I actually agree with that wholeheartedly, and we talk about that, I believe in chapter 2, about while some people may listen to trap music and think more broadly that it's not conscious, we oppose that. We shut that down because an album, and I'm not speaking on him as a person, I don't know, I'm only speaking musically. Dying to Live, because you brought up Kodak Black, that is a conscious album, like believe it or not, right? And so we, mention, highlight artists that may come from certain backgrounds, may be a part of subgenres that they occupy, but yet and still, if they have messages that align and that are consciously driven, that's conscious music. However, not however it comes out, but with those things in mind, we consider that heavily.
Yeah, and I would also add to that, I think that if you're talking about being in the streets in its entirety, and we really emphasize that a lot of people glorify things in their music, but so if you're talking about selling drugs, but I'm also hearing you talk about fearing of going to prison or your friends dying and all of the negative elements that come with being in the streets too, it's honest, and it's coming from an honest place, and somebody can listen to that and learn, and it can still be progressive, as long as you're not glorifying those actions. So, and I think J. Cole does a beautiful job of bringing artists who aren't talking about that type of stuff and kind of forcing them to talk about it on the song. My first thing that comes to mind is the joint he has with Lil Durk, and him kind of having Lil Durk get out of his comfort zone and actually have to talk about something with a little more substance.
I don't know why Kodak is on Silent Hill on my man's is just saying whatever, but I mean, that's something that maybe he wouldn't have done if he approached that beat himself. I don't know, but.
All right, well, let's give it up for